Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Literacy View. We have a very special guest with us today. We have Principal Lisa Reed from Vancouver Schools in Washington State. Lisa is also the Vice President of the Reading League chapter in Washington. Is that correct, Lisa?
That's correct.
And I think you are also the treasurer.
That is also correct.
So you have some very important roles. You are a very busy person, and we appreciate you joining us here with us on the Literacy View. I'm Faith Borkowski, and this is my co-host, Judy Boxner. And we are so happy to be here. We're kicking off our October Dyslexia Awareness Month with you, Lisa. And although this isn't an episode specifically on dyslexia, you as a principal work with teachers, with children of all different abilities, with all different learning issues. And we wanted your take on an article that Judy and I found really fascinating. It was written by Zach Groshell. Judy and I were also on Zach's podcast. And if you haven't seen that, you should definitely catch that. It was a great conversation with Zach. Zach is a big fan of direct instruction, and he does a podcast on that besides his other podcast. And he wrote an article, and it was all about lesson planning, and it was called The Truth About Lesson Planning. And this is really close to my heart because I remember those days of lesson planning. And so we're going to take a deep dive into what Zach had written about. It affects everyone. I see Judy chomping at the bit, wanting to jump in already. Judy, what do you want to say about it?
Yeah, why do you think I look so exhausted today? It's been a long day at work, and guess what I had to work on with my staff today? Lesson planning. It was so intense that I feel like I'm dying a slow death. That's how intense it was, and how many emotions there were flying through my own building. And just want to remind our viewers, you can bring us to your schools. Faith and I are working with schools, professional development retreats, workshops, lesson planning, data. Faith, what else do we do? 1,000,001 things, right?
We also do virtual as well. So it could be in person, virtual. We're here to support our principals, our teachers, district administrators.
And the biggest thing that we're doing this year is we've partnered with universities. We are partnering with universities. We want to change what education looks like for teachers at the university level. We feel that that's a critical piece, and we're passionate about bringing research to practice inside those classrooms. So universities, you know where to find us. Faith and Judy at theliteracyview.com. Once again, Faith and Judy at theliteracyview.com. But it's funny that we are doing an episode on lesson planning today. Guess what I'm doing tomorrow at work? Another session, round 3 of lesson planning with my teachers. It's intense.
Now, hopefully this episode will change the trajectory
maybe
of what teachers do and how they spend their time.
And let me just say something. What's funny is my principal doesn't know this, but the first thing I gave to my teachers when they walked into the first 3 sessions for round 1 was Zach's article. I said, this is the best article I've seen in a long time. This is really straightforward. This talks about everything that we've been doing with explicit instruction for so long, and it just synthesized it in such a beautiful way. So I can't wait to get started. And Lisa, thank you so much for being here. We loved being on your podcast. That was one of our favorite recordings with you when we recorded. And Lisa is also the wonderful principal that sent us the most incredible gift that I think her dad helped make. Lisa, can you tell our viewers what you sent?
Yes.
What you sent us in the mail?
Yeah, so my dad is retired and he likes to buy all sorts of like expensive equipment. And so he has this laser machine thing that he can engrave anything, clothes, acrylic, glass. And so he makes acrylic like designs and then they light up and their LED lights up. And so I sent, after you guys were on the Reading Link podcast, or we did a video recording, I was like, what could I get the people that, like, you guys just really inspired me. I think I was, as with anything, you kind of get to the end of your night and you're just like, here, okay, we're going to get through. I'm going to do this. And I just left like so inspired by the two of you and like your advocacy and all that you like. Your podcasts actually inspire me as I'm driving down the road to the grocery store, and I'll listen to them while I'm picking up groceries and stuff. And you just ask the questions that I am thinking about, the questions that I almost feel like if I ask those, I might get in trouble. Like, oh, am I going to look bad? Am I going to make my district look bad? Or,
well, I'm glad that we're reading your mind, and I hope there are more principals like you, Lisa, listening. I really think that more principals need to listen to what's happening in the literacy world, and we hope to inspire leaders just like you. So here we go, Lisa. We're going to get started. So after reading this article, Zach has a really great way of getting to the point. And just here's something I just pulled out. And it was, to me, it says it all. In a perfect world, it, meaning lesson plans, wouldn't exist. What do you think about that as an administrator, as a principal of a building? How do you feel about lesson planning? In a perfect world, it wouldn't exist.
I literally wrote, like, I circled it and I was hoping you would ask that something about that line, because I wrote down in my little notes, I was like, this caught my eye and I was hooked. Like, there's a secret that I'm missing out on. Like, okay, we've been doing it wrong. We don't have to lesson plan. We don't have to spend these hours and hours lesson planning, revamping the wheel, rewriting things. And so I do think in a perfect world, the amount of time that teachers are spending hours of their own time rewriting curriculum or writing curriculum and trying to figure out the flow of concepts and how the objectives fit together and the standards. I come from middle school too, so I'm an elementary principal, but prior to that, I was a middle school teacher and a middle school associate principal. And I taught English and history, and we wrote our curriculum. Like, there were books that we had, there were like resources, but it was up to us to put all of that together. And I think in his article, it says, if you teach history, if you teach certain subjects, there really isn't a lot of material or curriculum to rely on. So you are the curriculum designer, and then you are the preparer of that curriculum. And like, Judy, you're exhausted after lesson planning today with your teachers and tomorrow. And I've paid my teachers so many hours and like extra time, to go unit plan and lesson plan. And then we end up shifting gears in some way and focusing on some other aspect. And so then we have to revamp. And then, how Google gets, we can't find the things and so I hate the word lesson planning, like, to be honest. And it was a breath of fresh air to hear him say, yes, you're lucky if you have curriculum that is like, that already exists for yourself and you can just prepare that curriculum. But let's be honest, we all are going to have times where we have to write lesson plans. And so here's a really good framework for thinking so that you're not spending the 4 pages like we did in college.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So Judy, Lisa just mentioned like we did in college. And I remember that a lot of assignments we had in teacher education programs revolved around us writing lesson plans. And it were, you had these really extensive lesson plans to fill out. And of course, as an elementary school teacher, you're teaching lots of subjects. And so you are creating these lesson plans multiple times throughout the week, for 2 weeks, a month at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Did it change? Did your planning change today when you were planning with those teachers? Or are you using something similar to what we kind of know as the traditional lesson plan?
I have so many feelings about this topic, so many dirty secrets that I feel I have from my past, so many emotions. It's amazing.
Let's hear it, because I do too.
So it's funny, Faith. In my training, when I was getting my master's, I don't remember a lot of lesson planning instruction, actually. I remember just learning about thematic units and stuff like that. Not a lot of lesson planning. And when I was in the classroom for a very, very long time, I have to be honest, I wasn't a fancy lesson plan writer, but I always knew what I was teaching, why I was teaching it, and how. And I have to tell my dirty secret. Can I do it on the air? No judgment. For many years, I used to write them on index cards with like my little steps and my process. It was nothing fancy. I never felt like I had to be this fancy schmancy lesson plan designer. And then I started coaching in 1,000,001 schools, which I've been doing for the last years. And I've seen such a grand variety of expectations from different administrators. And sometimes I find it to be quite terrifying. Like, they want so much in there. And is all of that information for the admin? Is it for the admin to feel good? Who is it for? Because it's so bulky that somebody could have a heart attack planning it.
So let me ask you something. Didn't you have to hand in your lesson plans?
So we did have to hand in lesson plans for formal observations. And sometimes some of my administrators were more kind than others, and they were fine with the way that we had it. And sometimes it was just a basic lesson plan. And sometimes I evolved into making fancy lesson plans. And guess what? The ones that I planned with my teachers today looked a whole lot different than what I would have planned in my balanced literacy days. And I was very proud of my sessions today. I think some of my newer teachers felt overwhelmed. Some of my senior teachers felt enlightened. But I think that the way things look different for my staff today versus back then was really thinking about kids. And that was really the main focus. It was what am I teaching? Why am I teaching? And how? And our school, one of my school sites where I'm coaching now, it was really about the process. We are digging deep into the process of how to do something. And I think as a system for a couple of years, we've thought so much about decoding and how to teach that for the last couple of years, which I think is amazing because that was totally neglected for such a long time. But now we're also thinking about comprehension, because we can't forget about comprehension, even in K-2. It's not something that needs to be neglected, but there is a science on how to teach certain skills and there's strategies as well. And I'm finding that a lot of teachers are not as confident in that. So I think talking about the process on how to teach that and pre-planning that is important. And it doesn't have to be fancy. But if a teacher doesn't know, how can we effectively show our kids how to do something? So I think it was
I want to know from Lisa, what is your expectation for a lesson plan? So are you expecting something that's really involved? Are you looking for just a quick, objective? What passes the test for you as a principal? And then I'm going to tell you my dirty secret.
And I just also want to note how tied into the standard. A lot of principals that I work with are very, very obsessed with standards, and they could say them off the back of their head faster than I could, like KR1, 1, 1, blah, 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 blah.
Mm-hmm. You know, I just in the last year ran into a model called the instructional core, and it's like a triangle, and it talks about, you know, you got the student at the top, you've got the teacher over on the other corner, and you've got the content on the other corner. And it talked about, you know, like we want to have good relationships between the teacher and the student, which, you know, if you're a good teacher, you have those, that is like a great relationship. And then we have pretty good relationships with the teacher and their content. The teacher tends to love their content, and especially if they're secondary, they're nerding out on all that stuff, right? But where we end up getting a little weak is, I believe, is the student to the content and that relationship. And there comes, you know, then you're thinking like, okay, if it's math, we've got a lot of kids with math phobia. I was one of those kids that, like, I don't know when it happened, but I had a math phobia. And so getting me to have a love relationship with math was going to take more work. And so, and then in the middle of that triangle is the task. So like, what are we asking kids to do? And so I've really tried to change how I go in when I go in for teacher observations. And I'm looking at what the students are doing rather than focusing solely on, okay, what the teacher is doing. And it's been really freeing, because what you said, Judy, about your lesson planning and now it's student focused. Isn't that funny that like that was a shift? Like you would think that that would be all along what we were focusing on. But we tend to like, okay, does the teacher have the learning target, the objective, the, you know, whatever the school's focused on? Do I care about some of that? Like if the kids know what they're learning and the kids know how they're going to get there, like if there's some way that the teacher communicates that, that's what I care about. Do the students know what they're going to do that day and how they're going to get there? And then does there feel like there is a clear instructional routine, like almost like you just want to be a student in there, like the path to the end is so clear and just like structured and explicit and guided, and then moves to independent practice. And because if not, then we start to see the behaviors, because the kids are unclear with what the goal is, what the structure is. And sometimes those conversations are around like, you know, you look at the students' work on their desk, and that's where the good questions come. Like did the students succeed in the ways that you thought they would? Let's look at, here's what I noticed as I was going around. And I just feel like if we focus on what the students are doing, the conversations just go way better, because the teachers really want to know how, like, what did you notice about that student? And sometimes I'll even take photos of the work so we can just look at it together, because I would appreciate that. I want to be the kind of principal that I wanted as a teacher. I wanted to talk about student work and with my principal, like how cool would that be?
Lisa,
I don't know if I answered your question, but
well, do you collect lesson plans?
I don't collect lesson plans. That might be only for certain situations, if I feel like that is something that I need to ask for. I was a big coach and an athlete growing up, and I just think to have a coach go to a practice, if my coach came to basketball practice without a lesson plan, without a structure, without the plan being prepared, it doesn't go well, right? And it becomes chaos, and you've got all these, you know, you got 15 girls running around like not caring and screaming and, you know, whatever. So if there is not intentional planning, then I will require some sort of, you know, a support like that. At my school, we do focus on unit plans. And so we're, you know, like what is the topic? What's the theme? We're talking, you know, whatever. We've just recently shifted like to science of reading 3 or 4 years ago. You guys had Stacey Bain on with Educate. And so we've adopted her framework, her 7-step framework, which, starts at lowest complex, the read aloud, moving up to 6 and 7 is reading and writing. And so I've really like decreased the importance in my head about this, like having this unit plan and this fancy thing, and I don't even know. It's still messy. And then so like I don't know if that's the right answer, but that's where I've landed.
There's no right answer.
That's where I've landed.
The literacy view. There's no right answer.
Right.
We're
So
just having a discussion.
Faith, I'm not going to let you off the hook. I want to know your dirty secrets soon.
Well, that's what I'm getting at, to my dirty secrets. So I have to
wait, but don't make it a hashtag quickie like we had that episode.
No more quickies.
For those
Lisa, did you know that we were porn bombed on the Literacy View?
I did not.
We had all the top researchers and educators on, and because Faith thought of the name hashtag quickie, it didn't. Yeah, we got quite the quickie ones.
Anyhow, getting to my dirty little secret. So this was, I was always required, not just me, but the whole school was required to give in their lesson plans. This was true when I worked in New York City, and it was true when I moved to Long Island. And so I used to spend Saturdays with my lesson plan book and papers everywhere on my bed. And it would take me like a whole day of writing up these extensive plans because I had to hand them in to my administrator to get a little check that it was handed in. But really looking for page numbers, this, that, all these types of things. And I have to tell you, it was a work of fiction. I'm telling you right now, it was all made up just to satisfy a requirement, because there was no way that I could function writing something up way in advance when I knew that if you are going to be responsive to the children, you can't possibly plan way in advance and stick to this fictional nonsense. It was pure nonsense. So I just was writing it just to please someone else. And then I had my own preparation that I would go by. So it was like I had a lesson plan book that I would hand in that was a work of fiction. And then I had my own thing that I was using to make sure that I was meeting the needs of the children in my class. And I am sure there are people out there probably nodding and saying I did the same thing. I know I was not the only one making up lesson plans, but it was kind of just so that the principal could say, oh, yes, I made sure everyone gave in their lesson plans. And it was just something to say that it was done. It had literally no value whatsoever. So I want to get back into what Zach said in this article. And he makes a very clear distinction between lesson planning and, as you said, Lisa, preparation. So being prepared and having a lesson plan can be very different, because what Zach was talking about in direct instruction, you have a script. So in the Zig Engelman's, direct instruction, everything is written out, what the teacher would say, what the teacher would even gesture, what the children are expected to do, and what to do in case they go off in the wrong direction, and how you could give them choice and contrast. So you don't have to have these extensive lesson plans, but you do have to be prepared. Can you talk a little bit about that as an athlete, as you said, Lisa, as a coach, as a principal, as a former teacher? What is the difference between a lesson plan and being prepared?
I'm just thinking of this term, like I just don't want to do to teachers what, like, we want to do for teachers what works best for them, not to them, but with them and for them. And I didn't say that very well, but when you were talking about lesson planning and it was a work of fiction. Same thing with our school improvement plans that we've done for years and years. They're works of fiction initially because they're 20 some pages. Many years ago, I was a literacy specialist, and I was given a whole day to just go bust out the SIP plan, like in the office, like, and then, there's another document that's like the actual goals. It might be like a 1-pager. And so that I feel like is the difference. It's like you have to be prepared, and you have to know what your end in mind is. Like, if you know what your end in mind is, like at the end of this day in this writing, in this, literacy block, we're going to read this text, but we're also going to be writing a claim from the author with a piece of evidence and a reasoning. If you know what that is, and you are crystal clear on what that looks like and what you want from your kids, I honestly feel like if you know that, the rest just falls into place. Like, of course, you're going to have to think through it. But for me, my dirty secret, little secret, was when I was a middle school teacher, it was in the shower. My best ideas, I mean, I know people say that and it sounds silly, but my best ideas were coming in the shower as I'm thinking through, like, okay, if I were them, and like, okay, here's what I'm going to do. And if that doesn't work, and you're just kind of going through each iteration of like kind of what it could look like and what it should look like. And I think that my biggest fault, though, when I would prepare for a lesson was like Zach talked about, going, identifying what the students already know, and then figuring out what prerequisites need to be, they need to have before you teach. And I don't think I did that very well. And so I would often spend like the whole block period on like the prerequisite skill and not get to the actual lesson. And I think I would take too big of a thing. Like, I would do claim, evidence, reasoning all in one session. Well, probably that's not good. Like, let's start with claim first, like on the first day, right? And then go through that process. So it just
how
feels
reflective you are, though, Lisa. See, that's what we want from principals. We want them to be reflective and honest about their own practice. And that's how we grow. So, Judy, could you weigh in?
I'm a little mad at you.
You're mad at me? Why is everyone mad at me?
Why aren't you? My cheers button is not charged again. Why can't you give Lisa a cheer? She's so reflective. She's so humble. And you know what? Don't we wish that more administrators worldwide, in America and all over the world? Exactly.
She's giving herself a cheers. Good girl.
You know what I like about Lisa? And I think more administrators need to, if you haven't taught a lesson in a long time, administrators, teach a lesson. See what the teachers feel like. See what I have to give credit. My principal's tough. And some days I want to go home and cry. I'm not going to lie. And I call Faith and I complain. But I have to give him credit where credit's due. He recently modeled a lesson. He recently made a process chart because that's what he wants right now for my staff. So he practiced. And I was brave enough to give my own admin feedback. I said, hey, you weren't making check marks as you were doing the steps, and that might really help the kid. And he said, you know what? You're right. And we're all reading Anita Archer's explicit instruction book. I read it years ago, but now my staff is reading it with myself and my administrator. But I think that, Lisa, you definitely deserve a cheers. You do the work. You're in the trenches. You're not like this scary monster admin that's just, mean. because, you know, I've seen so many principals. This is year 29 for me. Yes, year 29, 50 years old with 29 years. I've seen admins that make lesson planning dreadful. They will put a little envelope up and your lesson plan has to be in there, and they would come and pick it out. And if you didn't have it, you'd be in big fat trouble. I've seen principals that just would tear people apart if your materials weren't on there and your objective wasn't clearly stated, and that it had to be like this big Broadway show. But I've also seen on the other side teachers that just wing it. And I don't really feel that comfortable with the winging thing.
So I want to stop you right there. I think let's really unpack that, because that is kind of what we were trying to get at, Judy. The idea, what's the difference between being well prepared and not just winging it, or doing an activity like a plan that is just kind of a waste of time. So planning isn't a waste of time, but writing an extensive plan that, you know, you're just doing it for someone else and it doesn't really help you, and it doesn't really reflect what's truly going on in the room. And I think that's something that administrators, you need to know the difference between looking at a lesson plan and knowing if somebody is well prepared. Two different things. You can have a beautiful lesson plan on paper, and that doesn't mean that it's going to translate to a great lesson in the classroom.
Lisa, can you please hold up your cheer sign for my co-host?
Thank you. Thank you. So let's call some BS now. I also have that BS button. So Judy, I'm sorry, you know, Amazon Prime is happening now. You could just get another BS button and another cheers button, even though you lost it somewhere along the way. It's time to splurge. I'm sure you could get it now.
I can't take it. We have to do a donors choose for Judy.
We're going to do a crowdfunding for a BS button for Judy. So let's.
Hey, you know what? That actually makes sense. And I want to point out something else, guys. The Literacy View is a self-funded podcast. How many other podcasters out there are not self-funded and are being sponsored by companies and a lot of other BS? Guess what Faith and Judy do? We do this by ourselves. We're working in the trenches. We're still working like dogs. And we're not just talking the talk, we walk the walk. Yeah, Faith.
To those of you out there, because of course I started talking while the mic was muted, but for those of you out there who are watching the Literacy View and not just listening, I am wearing "Fidelity is the new F-bomb." Right here, you can see it. Fidelity.
Oh my God, she's being naughty. Faith, that angle.
I saw Lindsay Kennedy's post on Fidelity, and we've been saying this for a long time. So I wanted to throw it out there that we have merch. The Literacy View has merch, and you too can have Fidelity is the new F-bomb.
And we love to give out our merch when we do professional development with schools and staff. A lot of schools are buying our merch like crazy for their teachers. And they'll buy one shirt for one training and another shirt for another training. So it's really fun. Faith and I are basically starting a movement. We want a revolution where education feels fun, exciting, and where you can just learn in a way that feels completely not traditional.
And
how many more PowerPoints can somebody see when they're at a training? Sitting there with the one and done BS.
Yeah. So anyhow, let's get into it. Lisa, from this article, I want you to call BS on a few things that you see. And, it could be actually right from the article that you want to take point by point, or it could just be from your own experience. Well, we want to hear a few things from a principal's point of view that you feel is.
Yeah. One of them is, okay, so how do I phrase it? So would I phrase it like it talks about it's a systems failure, not teacher failure. So the BS would be we blame our teachers for not playing. Like, is that kind of how, is that what I'm supposed to do here?
Anything goes, Lisa.
Anything goes.
Anything goes. Just have that conversation. Don't worry about me liking or not liking what you say. Okay? Just go for it.
I think another thing that I was reading, Zach says the teacher working in a school that buys a bunch of shiny hot garbage for them to use or makes everyone design their own curriculum from scratch. That's just it's BS. Like, I agree with him. So it's BS that we do that to teachers. I remember being we bought a new curriculum many, many years ago when I was a middle school teacher, and we got training the day before school or 2 days, and it was a terrible training, like, and we walked away not really knowing what to do. And it was completely bloated curriculum. So there was like 3 or 4 things you had to look through to even make sense of how it all fit together. And so it was shiny and it was pretty. And it was a hardback and it was expensive, but ended up being garbage. And then we ended up moving it to like a literacy support class curriculum. And so they all ended up in the warehouse. So that just feels, the more that I'm in this career, like, I'll be honest, this week's been kind of a hard week. And I'm kind of like, am I making a difference? And what I am doing making a difference?
Can I just interrupt you? If you are asking that question, then you are making a difference, because people who aren't making a difference don't even ask that question.
Yeah.
Think about it.
Yeah. And that's true. Thank you. But then you know what turned it around was I went into 3 classrooms yesterday and it got me out of my funk. And just seeing the teachers and the kids and being in there. So it was just a reminder, like, that's where the joy is being in the classrooms. Other BS things, let's see here. I just think one thing we do to our new teachers is you're a new team member to a certain subject or elementary where you have to teach all the things. And we don't really tell you what to teach. Like, if you join a team that's dysfunctional and they don't have good units or like structures to their curriculum, we just let them fail. And I think that is BS. That I've seen it happen way too often. And we give them the hardest class with no plan. And so that lesson planning is a bad word in my book. Like, I think about it and I think about the hours and hours of time spent on weekends away from your own kids. But yet you can't wing it, and you have to know what your end in mind is with that unit. And I just come back to that. And if you know that, then the rest kind of falls away for you as a teacher. And it's not as important when you know that. So did I do okay with the BS? That's what I have.
You did better than okay. I mean, you said a lot of important things. And I think we need to talk a little bit about that. So you mentioned that often the newest teacher gets the worst class, right? It's like, okay, newbie, figure it out, and I remember my very first year of teaching. I was 21 years old. I had 32 students with a para. That's what we called them in the city, with a para, and a teacher assistant with me. and it was a third grade class, 32 kids. And I was given like a lot of the ones that the senior teachers didn't want in their room, and that was my very first year. You sink or you swim, and that's it. So it's really it's a very unfair way to put teachers in that position. So Judy, as I was reading Zach's article, he also talked about how most teachers do not get a program that is very explicit, like direct instruction, where everything is kind of scripted for you. And some people, really hate a scripted program. Yet, as he said, that frees you up to be able to then be a little bit more creative, to be able to prepare better, to think about your students more. Feel about what he said in terms of that a lot of teachers don't have access to programs like this, and when they're left to their own devices, they really don't know what to do. They don't know how to do it well. Any thoughts on that?
1,001 thoughts, Faith. 1,001. I think it is absolutely unacceptable and extremely annoying that programs have been mandated on lists that don't have that much evidence behind them, that don't have that much research, because they said, oh, evidence-aligned practices. So what? Do you know how many of my teachers have to spend endless amounts of time rewriting the BS that's in those books that don't go really along with the science, that don't have a clear gradual release, that don't have a real I do, we do, you do, that they all of a sudden have to like take this mess and unscramble it. And then unscrambling it takes time, right? And then we have some teachers that are doing it just old school, spending all weekend rewriting these lessons that are bulky with 700 worksheets and 700 options, choose your own adventure and make it work. And then there's some people that are making slideshows. A lot of the younger generation of teachers I'm seeing are very slide heavy. I can't picture going home and cutting and pasting and making snipping tools with 700 things. I don't even know how the young kids keep up with that. I mean, I could do it, but like you have to plan like 8 lessons a day. How on earth are you going to find time to do these magical things and then hope that the best happens? Because I think what people really have to keep in mind is the kids. And I think people need to keep in mind when you're doing a lesson, you really have to really get granular on what do you want the kids to do and make sure that they get to do it in practice. Because if you miss that practice piece where the kids are actually doing that heavy lifting after the we do and doing the work, and like Lisa said, looking at those outcomes, which I think so many people don't look at, so many administrators will look at that plan rather than seeing what did the kids produce. See what those kids produce is everything. Because if they're not producing what you wanted them to produce or what you were teaching, then did you really succeed? Absolutely not. And I think that I'm angry. I'm angry for my teachers. And I've said this on another episode of the Literacy View. I don't think Faith agreed with me, but I still feel strongly that maybe we need to explore a different model, even for elementary school, where this is your math teacher and this is your reading teacher, and the kids don't switch rooms, but the teachers switch rooms. Why not give the kids an expert that's great in literacy and knows the pedagogy inside out and really well with gusto and passion? And think about how much less planning that teacher could do planning for that class. And that class, it's a similar lesson, just, thinking about different kids, because it's not reasonable anymore. Teachers are getting more and more in my own building. Teachers are now in, because a lot of BS, whatever, I'm not going to get into it, but now they're also teaching on top of everything else because these programs weren't maybe designed as well. You're teaching foundational skills. You're teaching a bulky ELA curriculum. You're teaching now science and social studies as a classroom teacher. You're possibly teaching a million other content areas. When does it stop?
So,
When does it
okay,
stop?
but that's okay. So you said Faith probably doesn't agree with me. So I'm going to jump in. So I think what you're saying is that it's better to have a subject expert for everything, like they do in middle and high school, and to departmentalize the day. But in K-2, they're babies. And a lot of that is forming a relationship with the teacher. And I think it's a lot to expect a very young child to have different people doing different things all day long. And even if the teacher is the one switching and the children are staying put, or however you want to look at it, I've taught, well, I'm just saying, I've taught first grade as a classroom teacher, third grade, fourth grade, and fifth grade. And when I taught fifth grade, my principal in Brooklyn decided to do just what you're saying. And it worked in fifth grade, okay, where the teachers moved around and taught a certain subject and planned, and they just kept doing that subject with kids coming in at different times, and they did some tracking. And the point is they were a little bit older. For young children, I think it is very hard. Having taught first grade, I am not so sure that would work very well.
But my point is, that's your opinion, and this is my opinion. I wish that there would be some research done on this topic and maybe try it in some settings, because we don't know. It's your opinion versus my opinion.
That's true.
I think kids are adaptable. I think kids adjust way easier than people think. I think it's about implementation. But the bottom line is, I don't think there's any, maybe there is research. Maybe a researcher is going to reach out to us. But I think that unless we start getting creative and thinking a little bit outside the box, we're overburdening our teachers. And I don't think it's fair to ask teachers to plan 7,000 lessons a week. So and if we want them to do it well, what could a solution be?
What's your opinion? And don't worry about hurting our feelings.
No, it's something that we've been thinking about, and I've been thinking about. I have two really good friends so this is my 25th year, and same with them. They went back to the classroom after being in a specialized position or a teacher on special assignment, and they are both drowning in the lesson planning and just going day by day. And they're veteran teachers. Like they've got, their classroom management's okay. They've got good rapport with families. They're really good at technology, but they are just drowning in this planning. And so I wonder what's gonna give for our teachers. And I do think third, fourth, fifth for sure. Like you could do it, and it probably would be, you'd have to have the right team. You'd have to have people willing, because you're also like we have we're a Title I school, and our kids are not perfect, and they're a lot, and there's a lot of different behaviors. And I always wondered if they're having to work with 3 different classes of third graders. But if you're just teaching one subject, like you're getting really good at it. The other barrier is like the special arts or fine arts block classes. That has become a barrier. If you don't have common planning within a grade level, then it's really challenging to create a schedule where you can rotate your kids around. I tend to be with Judy. I think kids are super adaptable, and I wonder if in the right conditions with the right teachers, it could work. I really do think that it could work.
Here's my thought on that. Instead of thinking about how we could jam more into the day, why don't we do a better job of paring down what's really important and go deeper and better with what's important for each grade instead of piling on a bunch of BS on teachers and expecting them to be mother, father, counselor, everything to these kids. And it's unfair. It's a ridiculous thing.
And Faith, let's be honest why it happens sometimes, because I think social media is a very dangerous thing. And Faith has motivated me to listen to a lot of podcasts that are not specifically education related, but they are changing my life. And some of them have said that we listen to things online and it's not the majority that's actually speaking. It's the extreme on one side or the extreme on another side. And unfortunately, there's some voices that are speaking on behalf of educators and people in the profession, many of them sometimes being journalists, I'll say, and they're feeding information, and principals becoming attached to these journalists thinking that they're actual educators or actual researchers when they're not. And they'll say, this is what has to happen in a classroom, and this is what is integral to the classroom. And that's disrupting what's actually happening in buildings that needs to happen for kids. And unfortunately, I'm seeing that even come my way, where we're squeezing in so much to early childhood that something critical can get compromised. And I
agree with you.
And I tried this week.
We were having this conversation.
I cried this week because I lose sleep at night knowing that because people on social media that aren't qualified are saying a lot of BS, my literacy block could get compromised, where foundational skills time for K-2 can be minimized, or where sometimes I'll hear from people, oh, small group, no, it's only tier 1. Yes, we all know tier 1's important, but we also know that when a kid is little, they need to learn how to read and see how their finger moves and stuff. So I think my point is, and I went a little off tangent, is we have to be careful with what we hear on social media. We have to be careful who we're listening to, because sometimes those people are sending a very dangerous message, and it trickles down to our classrooms and we feel it, and it's hurting us.
Yeah, so that was a conversation we were just having this past week. And just to put it in context, the person I was listening to said that, it's the loudest voices that are repetitive. You get that message again and again and again and again. And on social media, it's usually the most vocal on one side of an issue or the other. And it seems as though these people are speaking for the majority when they're really not speaking for the majority at all. And if we connect that to education, as Judy was doing, it's journalists, it's influencers who haven't even been in the classroom and haven't taught, and yet they are experts without any substance. And yet they make it so that they're in the know, and people start believing this message because they're out there and they say it again and again and again. So yeah, we're talking about lesson planning, but I think we're talking about something far deeper, that what Zach was really writing about is teachers don't have the tools that they need. They're spending a lot of time doing BS stuff instead of being prepared. They were never trained to do what they're being asked to do. And we just keep piling on more and more without really thinking about what kids are getting out of this. So Lisa, is there anything that you want to say to wrap up this conversation as a principal, as someone in the trenches, something that could be parting words that you feel would be very important to leave our listeners with?
The thing that I am taking away for myself, and then I'm going to give this article as well to my teachers at some point, is this framework, this FAST framework. It almost seems like a cousin to like explicit teaching, like like Anita Archer's like explicit teaching. You do I have it right here, the plan, the teach, the opening, body, closing, but within that you do the I do, we do, you do, and then practice. It just really feels like the cousin to that, and it gives a really clear line of thinking. So it's more of the teacher understanding like what is my end in mind and planning backwards from that and planning the models. I love how Zach said, decide exactly how you'll show students the key ideas, the expert thinking or procedures that they will need to do at the end of the lesson. And if you think about, like, I wrote this question down, lead with this question. Does the lesson design set students up for independent success at the end of the lesson? I just feel like that brings so much clarity if I lead with that question. So if I want my students to have independent success in that independent practice, what is that going to look like working backwards? So we tend to skimp on we'll do a lot of I do, and then the we do tends to kind of we might just do like some I do, and then we jump to that independent practice too soon. And I probably did that.
I agree with you 100%. 100%. It really is that we do part is not used nearly enough as it should be.
And I think that one thing that Zach mentioned consistently throughout the article is how important making the learning visible is during all parts of the lesson. And what a powerful thing to get out whiteboards. I want to see more whiteboards out in those classrooms. That's where you can practice. And Zach talks about that in depth in the article. How easy is it to like quickly hold up a whiteboard and show, did I get it when I'm practicing with you before I go off to my table independently? Because think about how many misconceptions you could clear up if you're seeing more kids doing it. And I also thought it was powerful how Zach incorporated elements of choral responses with the kids, maximizing student voice and so forth. I think that, that traditional way where you're pre-planning everything, that's great. But as educators, we have to also be prepared to pivot based on what's happening during the lesson. You could make that assumption that we're going to have this small group and I'm going to differentiate for this person, but you have to be really prepared to see what is happening during the lesson. What are the kids doing? Because I think it's almost a biased framework where we just assume something. Like even with the teachers that I was planning with today at work, we incorporated vocabulary. And instead of just telling kids what the words meant, we saw what the kids knew about those words and what experiences they had with the word before we just said, this is what the word means. I think we have to really monitor our kids. And I think the other important thing is, I do, we do, you do is great. But at any point, you might need to pivot back. You might need to do a we do again and give them more practice. And I think what Lisa said was very important. I've seen some administrators say, oh, no, forget about the we do because we got to get to the you do and we don't have enough time in the day. No, we don't skip it. We don't skip it. And if we have to come back to that topic the next day and finish it up, that's better than skipping it. We do not skip the we do. How can you let kids do something if you haven't given them a chance to practice it with feedback, with partners, with, and maybe it's a we do that we're doing it with the teacher, but then maybe it's another we do where we're doing it with partners before we get into the independent. I think it's dangerous where we think we should just skip things to squeeze it in. And I think that we have to hold Lisa accountable today. Faith, our biggest tradition on the Literacy View, I know she's done a lot of BS and cheers. We got to leave our listeners with 3 BS and 3 cheers overall.
No, she did say it already. I can't.
Cheers. What about 3 cheers, Faith?
Okay, cheers we could do. We're not going to ask her for any more BS. We did that already. But before we do, Lisa, have you weigh in on what you would want to cheer about. I just want to say something, just, my last words having to do with this. First, I just want to say that, we mentioned Anita Archer, but Zach Groshell wrote a book called Just Tell Them. And so he has a book out about explicit instruction. We had him on our show, and it's really a nice little book if you wanted to take a look at that as well. But something also about the article, he talked about having the guided practice with a model. That is also something that I think is very helpful that we miss. One thing that we had in the balanced literacy days was there was like an anchor chart and, a mentor text, like something that you look at that is a model of what the expectation is and guiding them through that. And sometimes that's lost, that we're kind of just jumping into something without giving them what the whole product is supposed to look like, and with all the steps laid out. And I think,
Lisa, get out the chairs, please, for Faith, please.
I'm honored, Judy. 2 cheers and 1 disagreement, not too bad. All right, Lisa, give us 3 cheers. Go ahead.
First of all, my first cheers is like, I'm so new to this is my first first podcast, but I've been on with you guys before, but I really am not fully ready to give my full opinions, because in kind of fear of making, I don't know, I feel all the things you guys felt, and yet I don't feel like I can say them. I'm going, in my district, I feel like I'm going to, it's naughty or so. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Well, you know what? Okay, so that's fair, because you have to return to your building and maybe you're a little uncomfortable saying certain things, but we don't have to personalize it. All right. You could just think about 3 things that you're excited about in education as a principal right now that you're seeing that's something positive that's happening.
Lesson planning would be great too. What are you seeing that's, maybe positive about lesson planning for staff?
Yeah.
One thing is that shift to focus on the cleaning up the errors and giving students feedback in the moment, rather than waiting until the common formative assessment, which is 2 weeks later. And it's like, if it's like, okay, we already kind of know how they did, so let's clean it up in the moment. That really is shifting that whole idea of feedback in the moment and cleaning things up. It's shifting. I used to be the PLC guru and believe that all things are PLC and common formative assessments, and I think there's a place for that, but there's such power in cleaning up in the moment. And just yesterday, I have a teacher whose goal is around. She has a student up at the dot cam using her own packet as they're going through the different steps of the framework, and then it's releasing her to go and help students in the moment and giving them that individualized feedback. So that is definitely something I know I never did as a teacher, was that as well as they're doing. The other thing is just the idea that in this conversation, we're recognizing teachers, you're right. We do have both sides, the negative and then the other side. And then you kind of feel like the actual work and how teachers are really feeling is not being recognized. And there's a negative, teachers are getting this negative, this negative thing. And it's a negative stereotype. And my personal goal this year actually is to tell my story, to tell our story. It's what can I influence? I can influence what the story I share about our school. And so that we are in charge of what we say. Like, this is what's happening at my school. These are the celebrations. And that's a goal of mine, to be more on social media. I've not made that a priority. And so that's kind of my number 2 goal. And then my last thing is, I just appreciate that there is a framework that Zach synthesized in a way that is not like, another document to have to go through, but it's really a thinking process for the teacher. And so, which starts with that end in mind. And I just come back to, like, let's simplify as much as we can, and strip things down to the most essential. And so I just felt like it was this article, that caption, in a perfect world, it wouldn't exist. Like, that caught my eye initially. And I feel hopeful that some of these ideas can help my teachers simplify their own lesson planning, because they're working hard. So.
I think it will. I'm sure it will.
And I think I want to just also say something. I think that you said something so important, that metacognition piece, showing kids your metacognition so that they can transfer and internalize and feel your struggle to do something and your process to do something. But I think there's one thing that we missed in this episode. AI is here. It's not going away. I used it to develop some of my lesson planning. I'm not ashamed to say it. The only thing that I noticed about AI is sometimes it's a little bit time consuming. My recommendation is to maybe start the planning a little bit by yourself, so you are using your brain power a little bit, because I was prompting for a very long time as I was experimenting. But don't be afraid of AI. If you understand pedagogy and you want to speak into your microphone as you're talking through your metacognition, and ChatGPT or other tools are helping you, don't be afraid to use it. Now, is it going to come out perfect on the first try? It's not. Trust me. It could look very ugly, but I think AI is going to change what lesson planning may feel like for the teacher and alleviate our burden if we still use that metacognition piece, where we're still doing a lot of the thinking about what's best for kids.
Okay, let's wrap this up. I want to thank Lisa for joining us. I think it's very brave for a principal to come on and have this conversation with us. And I do think that parents and teachers want to hear more from administrators. And you really show compassion, understanding, and empathy with the teacher and what is expected of the teacher. So I do want to thank you for joining us.
And I wish that everybody had a principal like Principal Reed.
Yes.
I wish that I would have, in my days, had a principal like you. I think I would have felt safe. I think the conversations would be really honest, down to earth. Thank you.
And that's why you're our no BS bestie.
Well,
all right. You are in the
so
club, Lisa. All right. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.